My son demanded. I want the house, the cars, everything. My lawyer begged me to fight. I answered, hand it all over to him. Everyone thought I had lost my mind. At the final hearing, I signed everything away. He smiled, convinced that he had won, but he did not know that I had already won before even stepping foot in there. He kept smiling, right up until his lawyer turned completely pale when, 3 months. Barely 3 months had passed since I buried Arthur, the man who gave me back my faith and love after years of loneliness. I could still smell his aftershave on the living room recliner, and I still found his reading glasses resting on the dining room table. The house held his presence in every corner. The grandfather clock he restored for me kept ticking away the hours, with that steady rhythm that now only reminded me that time without him moved far too slowly. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I heard the engine of a pickup truck shut off in front of my house. From the kitchen window, where I was brewing a pot of dark roast coffee, just the way Arthur had taught me, I watched my son Tyler step out. He was not alone. Chloe, his wife, walked closely behind him, wearing those high heels that always seemed a bit too much for a simple family visit. But there was someone else. A man in a gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase. My heart raced. Something about the stiffness in their posture warned me that this would not be a friendly drop-in. I opened the front door before they could even knock. Tyler walked in without kissing my cheek, without his usual, "How are you doing, Mom?" His eyes completely avoided mine. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, using a voice that tried to sound firm, but that I, his mother, instantly recognized as insecure. "I want to introduce you to Mr. Richard Sterling, our attorney." The man in the suit extended his hand. I shook it out of pure politeness, even though my gut already anticipated the blow. They sat down in the living room. Chloe chose Arthur's recliner, the exact spot where he used to read the Sunday paper every morning. Seeing her sitting there hurt me more than any words they could possibly say. "Mrs. Davis," the lawyer began, pulling documents out of his briefcase. "Your son hired me to resolve a family matter in a civilized manner." Civilized. What an elegant word for what was about to happen next. Tyler cleared his throat. "Mom, it has been 3 months since Arthur passed away. I think it is time to talk about the inheritance, about what rightfully belongs to me. If you want to keep discovering real-life stories that touch the heart, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because sometimes the best lessons come from where you least expect them." I stared at him. My son. The boy I carried in my arms when his real father walked out on us. The young man I supported by working double shifts at the old textile mill on the edge of town. The man who was now looking at me as if I were nothing but an obstacle standing between him and a fortune. "What exactly do you think belongs to you, Tyler?" I asked with a calm voice, even though something inside me was starting to break. Chloe leaned forward, wearing that smile she probably thought was sweet, but that I always found terribly calculated. "Margaret, honey, we completely understand that you are going through a very difficult grieving process. That is exactly why we came with a fair proposal." "Fair?" I repeated. Mr. Sterling spread the paperwork across the coffee table. "Basically, ma'am, your son is requesting the house, the 2 pickup trucks, and a financial compensation of $50,000 for the years of family investment." The silence that followed was so heavy that the ticking of the grandfather clock echoed through the room. Every single second hammered against my temples. "Mom," Tyler continued, this time without looking me in the eye, "you are getting older. This house is way too big for you all by yourself. You do not even drive the trucks. And let us be completely honest, you cannot manage all of this property on your own. Manage. As if 25 years of working, saving every single penny, and building a life out of absolutely nothing had not taught me how to manage things. We can find you a nice little apartment," Chloe added with that overly sweet tone. "Something much more comfortable for your age. A place where you do not have to worry about maintenance or mowing the lawn. There are some really lovely assisted living facilities for seniors where you will be taken great care of." Assisted living facilities? Nursing homes. They were suggesting I go rot in a nursing home while they kept everything Arthur and I had built together. I felt something hot rise in my throat. It was not tears, it was pure rage. But a quiet voice inside me whispered, "Wait, listen, see who they truly are. You do not have to decide today, the lawyer said, packing the papers back into his briefcase. But I highly suggest you get legal representation. We can settle this the friendly way, or we can go to court. It was a threat dressed up as professional advice. Tyler finally looked at me. Mom, we only want what is fair, what we deserve. You have always been a reasonable woman. Reasonable. That word bounced around in my head as I watched them walk out of my house. Chloe took one long, calculating look at the paintings on the wall and the furniture, taking inventory of my life as if it were a thrift store clearance sale. When I finally closed the door, my legs gave out. I leaned against the heavy wood and let out the breath I had been holding in. The smell of dark roast coffee still filled the kitchen, but I had lost my appetite. I walked over to the window and watched them climb into their car. Tyler said something that made Chloe laugh out loud. They laughed. They had just walked out after asking for my house, my dignity, and my entire life, and they were laughing. That night, sitting in the rocking chair Arthur bought me for our 5th anniversary, I opened an old leather-bound notebook. On the very first page, with a trembling hand, I wrote down a single line. Today, my son stopped being my son. Today, I met a stranger wearing his face. But what Tyler and Chloe did not know, and what that fancy lawyer never imagined, was that this mother had not survived decades of hardship just to be defeated by a pair of greedy kids. They did not know that I already had a plan, and by the time they figured it out, it would be far too late. I did not sleep at all that night. I stayed in that rocking chair until the morning sun started shining through the curtains, remembering things I had spent years trying to forget. Because what Tyler did not know, what he never bothered to ask, was that I had already survived betrayals much worse than his. I was 23 years old when the father of my children abandoned us. 23, with 2 toddlers, absolutely no money, and no one to turn to. Tyler was 4 years old, and Sarah was barely 18 months. I remember waking up that morning and finding a note left on the kitchen counter. I cannot do this life. I am sorry. 9 words. That was all he left behind, along with a pile of debt and broken promises. Those first few years were pure survival. I got a job at the old textile mill on the edge of town, sewing industrial uniforms. I clocked in at 6 o'clock in the morning and clocked out at 6 o'clock in the evening. My hands learned to operate the heavy sewing machines even when my fingers bled from pushing the thick fabric. The loud hum of those machines still lives in my ears. Click, click, click. The sound of survival. I left the kids with Mrs. Higgins, my neighbor, who charged me next to nothing because she knew that next to nothing was exactly all I had. At night, when Tyler and Sarah were finally asleep, I would pull out my mother's old Singer sewing machine, the same one sitting in my sewing room right now, and do extra side jobs. Hemming pants, fixing curtains, making dresses for high school proms. I slept maybe 4 hours a night if I was lucky. Tyler was my little shadow in those days. He followed me all over the small apartment saying, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy," as if he was terrified that I might disappear too. I used to sing to him while I sewed, promising him that everything was going to get better. And when he cried because his sneakers were falling apart and the other kids at school made fun of him, I would wipe his tears and tell him, "Son, one day you are going to have everything you deserve. Your mom promises you that." Maybe that was where I made my biggest mistake. Maybe I spoiled him without even realizing it, trying to make up for the absence of a father who never looked back. Sarah, on the other hand, grew up fiercely independent, much less demanding. Sometimes I think she understood from a very young age that I was giving everything I possibly could, and that asking for more would be selfish. She became strong, quiet, and incredibly studious. At 18, she earned a full scholarship to a state university in the Midwest, and from there she jumped to New York City. Now she runs her own consulting firm. We talk every single week on video calls. She asks me how I am doing. She tells me about her work and her travels. But there is a distance between us that I never quite knew how to close. It is almost as if she learned how to not need me too much. And I never knew how to tell her that it broke my heart. Tyler was different. He stayed close to home. He went to the local community college, then got his accounting degree. He landed a decent corporate job. He used to come over for Sunday dinners every week. He would call me Mama and hug me tight. I used to think, this son really loves me. This son truly values everything I sacrificed. Oh, how blind I was. By the time I turned 45, I had been working at the mill for over 20 years. I was a floor supervisor by then. I was making a little more money. I had managed to buy a small townhome in a modest suburban neighborhood. It was not a mansion, but it was mine. It was at the local hardware store where I first met Arthur. I walked in looking for a screwdriver to fix a loose hinge on my bathroom door. He was standing behind the counter, wearing a green apron full of pockets and a smile that lit up the entire room. He was 52. He had been a widower for 3 years. He did not have any children. "How can I help you, miss?" he asked. Miss. It had been years since anyone had called me that. It was not exactly love at first sight. It was something much better. It was respect. Arthur treated me as if my opinions mattered, as if my exhaustion was valid, as if my life had value beyond what I could provide for other people. We got married 8 months later in a simple ceremony down at the county courthouse. Tyler was my witness. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "You deserve to be happy, Mom." Sarah called from college to congratulate me. She said she was happy for me, but she could not make the trip down. Arthur was not a millionaire, but he was a hard worker and very wise with his finances. His hardware store brought in a steady income. Together we saved. We bought this house 12 years ago. 3 bedrooms, a big backyard, a 2-car garage. We paid it off in 8 years, making double payments every single month without fail. Then came the trucks. Arthur needed them to haul lumber and building supplies for his best customers. A 2020 Ford pickup and a 2019 Chevy Silverado. He took care of them as if they were made of solid gold. We bought the commercial property 5 years ago, when a neighbor down the street needed to sell fast. Arthur saw the investment opportunity. "Sweetheart, this is for our future, for when our bones get too tired to work," he told me. We rented it out to a local bakery. It brought in about $3,000 a month. We never lived in luxury, but we lived with dignity, with total peace, with a fresh pot of coffee in the mornings and a good movie on Saturday nights. With our hands intertwined and plans to grow old together on the front porch, Tyler started coming around a lot less after I married Arthur. Always with some excuse ready: work, exhaustion, social commitments. When he met Chloe 8 years ago, the visits spaced out even more. Arthur, who was a very observant man, pointed it out one afternoon. "Maggie, that boy only comes around when he wants something." I defended him immediately. "He is my son, Arthur. He is just busy building his own life." "Sure," he said, without pushing the issue. But the look in his eyes told me, "You will see." 4 months ago, Arthur collapsed while loading a heavy generator at the hardware store. A massive heart attack. He died before the ambulance even reached the hospital. At the funeral, Tyler did not shed a single tear. I watched him scrolling through his phone during the eulogy. And exactly 3 days after we put Arthur in the ground, he asked me, "Mom, when are they reading the will?" Now, sitting in this rocking chair, I understood that all the red flags had always been there. I simply chose not to look at them, because a mother always wants to believe that her child is good, even when all the evidence screams the exact opposite. The loans started very subtly. So subtly that at first, I did not even realize I was being used. The first time was 6 years ago, shortly after Tyler turned 32. He called me on a Thursday night, using that specific voice I knew so well, the exact same tone he used as a little boy when he wanted a new toy. Soft, almost ashamed. "Mom, can I ask you a huge favor?" "Of course, honey. Tell me." "I need $2,000. My car broke down and I need it to get to work. I swear I will pay you back on the 1st of the month." Arthur was sitting right next to me watching television. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye. He raised an eyebrow, but kept his mouth shut. "Do you not have anything in savings?" I asked. An awkward silence. "I had to use it on other bills." "Mom, I will honestly pay you back. It is just a loan." I transferred the funds the very next morning. 2 months went by, then 4, then 6. He never brought up paying me back, and I never asked him for it because, well, he was my son, And mothers do not act like debt collectors with their own children, right? 5 months later, another phone call. This time, he needed $5,000. Chloe wanted to take an online wellness course and get certified as a life coach. It is an investment in our future, Mom. Once she starts taking clients, I will pay you back the whole amount at once. This time, Arthur did speak up. Maggie, this is becoming a pattern. It is for her education, I answered back. So they can get ahead in life. And what about their actual paychecks? They both work. I did not have a good answer for that. I deposited the money into Tyler's account without telling Arthur. I pulled it from my personal savings, the account I had opened years ago, just in case of an emergency. My just in case was rapidly turning into because of my son. Chloe never finished that wellness course. 2 months later, I saw her posting pictures on social media from a luxury resort in Miami, drinking cocktails at a 5-star hotel. Well-deserved vacation, the caption read. Paid for with my money. With the money I earned, ruining my eyesight under poor factory lighting. But the worst part was not the loans. It was the complete transformation in his personality. Tyler used to visit wearing simple jeans. He would happily eat whatever casserole I put in front of him, and he would stay for hours just talking. After he married Chloe, everything changed. He started showing up in designer shirts, constantly checking his smartwatch, and refusing my cooking because we are watching our macros. The conversations became incredibly shallow. He stopped asking about my day. He only talked about business ventures he wanted to start, vacations to Europe, and the massive house he wanted to buy. He always wanted. He never gave. One afternoon, Chloe came over to visit me all by herself. She was wearing a smile that completely failed to reach her eyes. Margaret, I need to ask you for some advice, woman to woman, she said, perching on the very edge of the sofa as if my living room disgusted her. Tell me. Tyler and I are looking into buying a house. Something upscale, you know, in a really nice gated community. But the down payments are just outrageous right now. We would need about $15,000 to close the deal. And there it was. The real reason for her sudden visit. What about your own savings? I asked. She let out a theatrical sigh. Oh, Margaret, everything is just so expensive these days. The private gym memberships, the premium gas, the organic groceries I need for my gut health. You know how it is. No, I did not know. I had raised 2 children on generic brand macaroni and cheese, and they turned out perfectly healthy. Chloe, that kind of money is. It would just be a loan. She interrupted quickly. Tyler makes good money at the firm. We will pay you back in monthly installments. Think of it as an investment in your son's future, in your future grandchildren. Grandchildren. She dangled that word like a shiny piece of bait. And I, like an absolute fool, took the bite. I lent them the $15,000. Arthur found out when he reviewed our quarterly bank statements. What on earth are you thinking, Maggie? He asked me, not with anger, but with genuine, deep concern. That money was for a rainy day, for that eye surgery you keep putting off. My son needs it. His wife needs it. What they need is to learn how to balance a checkbook. Arthur, you never had children of your own. You just do not understand. I regretted the words the second they left my mouth. I saw the flash of deep hurt cross his face. You are absolutely right, he said quietly. I do not understand how a son can bleed his own mother dry like this. That night, we slept on opposite edges of the mattress, without touching. It was the only real fight we ever had in 12 beautiful years of marriage. Tyler and Chloe never bought that house in the gated community. 6 months later, I found out from a cousin that they had been seen at a high-end downtown nightclub ordering bottle service. A single bottle of that champagne cost what I used to make in a solid 40-hour workweek. The visits became rarer and rarer. They only showed up when they needed cash or when there was a free meal at a holiday family gathering. Arthur never brought it up again. He never rubbed it in my face. But I saw the quiet disappointment in his eyes every single time Tyler's name flashed on my phone screen. He knew exactly what was coming. Another desperate request, another loan that would never, ever be repaid. 1 month before he died, Arthur took me out for breakfast at our favorite local diner. He ordered his usual black coffee and an omelet. I got the blueberry pancakes. We ate in a comfortable silence for a few minutes until he set his fork down and reached across the booth to take my hand. "Maggie, my love, I need to tell you something and I do not want you to get defensive." "Tell me." "That boy, Tyler. I see a change in him. There is a hardness in his eyes that was never there before. And that woman he married, she is changing him. Or even worse, she is bringing out the entitlement that was always hiding in there. I wanted to defend him, but the words got stuck in my throat. Listen to me very carefully," Arthur continued, squeezing my hand tightly. "When I am no longer around, do not talk like that. When I am no longer around," he repeated with absolute firmness, "you need to watch your back. I have put everything in your name in the will because I trust you with my life. But you need to distrust anyone who only shows up when there is a checkbook on the table." 3 weeks later, Arthur was dead. And exactly 2 months after that, Tyler was sitting in my living room with a fancy lawyer, demanding I hand over every single thing Arthur had left to protect me. Sitting there in the rocking chair, doing the mental math of all the unpaid loans, all the ignored red flags, and all the unheeded warnings, I arrived at a grand total. I had handed my son $22,000 in the name of unconditional love. Love. What a deeply abused word. Arthur was right. He had always been right. And I, blinded by a mother's devotion, refused to see that my son was no longer the sweet little boy following me around. He was a complete stranger who had figured out that his mother was a personal ATM that never declined a transaction. But that was about to change. The phone calls started the very next morning after the meeting with the lawyer. Tyler was the first to call, exactly at 8 o'clock in the morning. "Mom, have you thought about what we discussed?" "No, good morning." "No, how did you sleep?" He cut straight to the chase, treating me like a pending transaction on his calendar. "Tyler, it has barely been 24 hours. "I know, but the longer we drag this out, the more complicated the paperwork gets." "Mr. Sterling says it is much better to wrap this up quickly, without all the unnecessary drama." Drama. He was calling my grief over losing Arthur, my utter confusion over his betrayal. Drama. "I need time to think." "Time for what, Mom? The house is already in your name, the trucks too. You literally just have to sign a few transfer papers, and we are done. Everyone walks away happy. Everyone. Except me." I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking as I poured my coffee. The rich aroma usually brought me comfort. It used to take me back to quiet mornings with Arthur, back when the world still made sense. At 10 o'clock, a text message chimed from Chloe. "Hey Margaret, sending you some links to some gorgeous little apartments. Look at this one. It has an elevator and everything. Absolutely perfect for your lifestyle." I clicked the links. They were tiny 500-square-foot units on the rough outskirts of the city. One was located right next to a deafening highway overpass. Another was in a building that looked like it had not been updated since the 70s. The nicest one on her list cost $200,000. In a neighborhood where car break-ins made the evening news every week, my house was worth at least $800,000. They wanted me to trade my beautiful home for a shoebox. I did not text back, but Chloe was not the type to give up easily. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone rang again. It was Tyler. "Mom," Chloe said, "you are ignoring her texts." "Are you busy?" "I am." "Busy doing what?" "Mom, you are retired. What could you possibly be doing all day?" That sentence hit me like a bucket of ice water. As if my life had zero value just because I was not clocking into a shift anymore. As if my days spent maintaining a home, grieving my husband, and simply existing were worth absolutely nothing. "Tyler, look, we need to have a serious talk. I am driving over right now." "No, Too late." The line went dead. He showed up at 3:30. This time he brought thick folders and even more paperwork. He sat down at the dining room table without waiting for an invitation. He spread the documents all over the exact spot where Arthur and I used to eat our breakfast. "Look, Mom." I ran the numbers. He pulled out a sleek, silver calculator. The house is worth about $800,000, according to the county tax records. The trucks, together, maybe $75,000 on a good day. The commercial property that the bakery rents, let us call it $400,000. That gives us a grand total of $1,275,000. Listening to him punch numbers into a calculator over the estate Arthur and I built with our own sweat made my stomach physically turn. Now, he continued, leaning forward, if we divide that between the two heirs. Sarah lives in New York City. She has not asked for a single dime, but legally she is entitled. I am just trying to be completely fair here, Mom. I want my exact half. $637,500. Over $500,000. That property is mine by right. I am your son. Arthur left it to me. He left it to me. Because you two were legally married, obviously. But now that he is gone, this automatically becomes family inheritance. He spoke as if he had rehearsed a legal script in the mirror. Mom, I am not trying to strip you of everything. I just want what is rightfully mine. It is for my future. For when Chloe and I finally have kids. For your grandchildren. There it was again. That heavy word. Grandchildren. Holding my grandmotherly heart hostage was his ultimate negotiation tactic. And how exactly am I supposed to live? On your Social Security checks. On whatever cash is left over. You can sell the bakery building, downsize to a much smaller place. Mom, you are 67 years old. What do you need a big house for? To live in, to breathe in, to have a piece of this earth that belonged to me after a lifetime of breaking my back for everyone else. I need to think about it. You have been thinking about it for days. His tone suddenly shifted. It grew incredibly cold. Look, Mr. Sterling explained the law to me. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. I would really prefer the easy way. Are you threatening your own mother? I am just being completely honest. I can file a probate lawsuit tomorrow morning. It will tie everything up in court for years. It will drain your accounts in legal fees. It will cause you massive amounts of stress. Do you really want to deal with that? At your age? My age. Once again, weaponizing my age as a weakness. I stood up, walked over to the counter, and grabbed my leather-bound notebook, the one where I wrote down everything important. I sat back down and carefully wrote the date and time of this exact conversation. Tyler looked at me with deep confusion. What are you doing? Taking notes. My memory is starting to slip, you know, because of my age. He completely missed the sarcasm. The drop-ins became a daily occurrence. Tyler and Chloe would show up completely unannounced, always armed with new manipulative arguments and fresh pressure tactics. One afternoon, they arrived with Mr. Sterling trailing behind them. The three of them sat on the large sofa across from me. Me, sitting completely alone in my rocking chair. Them, forming a solid brick wall of demands. Mrs. Davis, the lawyer began, using a patronizing, fatherly tone that made my blood boil. I have thoroughly reviewed your late husband's last will and testament. Yes, on paper, everything was left in your name. But surely you understand that morally speaking, a significant portion of that estate should pass down to his children. And my daughter has not asked for a single penny. Because she has her entire life handed to her on a silver platter up in New York. Chloe interrupted sharply. But Tyler lives right here. He needs the financial backing. He needs opportunities. Opportunities. Tyler was 38 years old, held a bachelor's degree, and had a stable corporate job. What more opportunities did he need that he could not build with his own two hands? The trucks, Tyler suddenly blurted out. At the very least, the pickup trucks should be signed over to me. I am the man of the family now. I need them for heavy lifting. You do not even know how to drive a manual transmission properly. I had learned to drive a stick shift at 40 years old. Arthur had taught me in an empty grocery store parking lot on Sunday mornings, showing me infinite patience. Now my own son was telling me I did not know how to handle a truck. Besides, Chloe chimed in, using that sickeningly sweet voice she weaponized so well. Margaret, at your age, you should be relaxing. You should not be stressing over property taxes, roof repairs, and plumbing issues. All that stress is terrible for your heart. You could have a massive heart attack, just like Arthur. She invoked Arthur's name. She actually had the nerve to use my dead husband's fatal heart attack as a threat. Mr. Sterling folded his hands neatly over his leather briefcase. Ma'am, I have the paperwork drafted. I can file the lawsuit at the courthouse this afternoon, or we can sign a voluntary transfer agreement right now. The choice is entirely yours. I need to consult with my own attorney. The three of them exchanged quick, nervous glances. You hired a lawyer? Tyler asked, completely failing to hide his shock. I am going to hire one. Chloe let out a condescending little giggle. Oh, Margaret, lawyers charge an arm and a leg just to look at an email. Why on earth would you throw your money away? It is so much better to keep this in the family. Family. What an absolute joke coming from the woman trying to throw me to the wolves. When they finally left, I sat frozen in the chair. The house fell completely silent. A heavy, suffocating silence. I walked down the hall and opened Arthur's closet door. His flannel shirts were still hanging in a neat row. I buried my face in his favorite blue plaid shirt and breathed in deeply. The scent was already fading. Arthur, I whispered into the dark closet. What do I do? But Arthur was gone. And I was entirely alone, facing off against a son who had trained himself to view me as nothing but a roadblock to a payday. Later that night, my phone buzzed at 11 o'clock. A text from Tyler. Mom, seriously, think about this logically. You do not want this to end badly. I love you. I love you. 3 words that used to make my whole day. Now they just sounded incredibly hollow, utterly fake, and deeply calculated. I opened my notebook and documented every single conversation, every veiled threat, every high-pressure tactic. My hands wrote with a shaky but determined grip, because if there was one thing 25 years at the textile mill had taught me, it was that every single stitch counts. That absolutely nothing goes to waste. That even the smallest, most insignificant scraps of fabric can be sewn together to create something incredibly strong. And they were handing me every single scrap I needed to stitch together my ultimate defense. They just had no idea yet. The psychological pressure became suffocating. Tyler was calling 3, sometimes 4 times a day. Chloe bombarded me with texts at all hours of the night. Links to Zillow listings for cheap condos. Brochures for active senior communities that were really just glorified nursing homes. Articles from wellness blogs about the magic of downsizing your life in your golden years. One afternoon, while I was out in the backyard watering the rose bushes Arthur had planted by the fence, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Another text from Tyler. Mom, Sterling says if you do not give us an answer by Friday, he is pulling the trigger on the lawsuit. Please do not force my hand. Do not force my hand. As if I were the villain in this story. As if simply defending my own home was an act of aggression. I dropped the watering can. The water pooled across the concrete patio as I sank down onto the cast-iron garden bench, the same bench where Arthur and I used to drink our coffee on Sunday mornings. I looked back at the house. Every single brick held a memory. The kitchen window we had glazed together after a bad summer storm shattered the glass. The front door we had painted a bright, cheerful blue because Arthur said it matched the sky on a perfect day. The grandfather clock inside, ticking away the rhythm of our shared life. They wanted to rip all of it away from me. I did not cook dinner that night. I was not hungry. I was completely drained of energy. I sat in the pitch-dark living room, the only light coming from the street lamp shining through the front blinds. I picked up my phone and opened my text messages. Hundreds of texts from Tyler. Over the last 3 months, not a single one asked how I was actually doing. Every single message was a financial demand disguised as small talk. I scrolled further back in the history. I scrolled back to the years when Arthur was still alive. Mom, can you spot me gas money? Mom, we are short on groceries this week. Mom, the washing machine broke. Can you help us out? Always taking, never giving. I kept scrolling. Years back, I found a picture Tyler had sent me when he was 30, right before he met Chloe. He was standing in a local park, wearing a genuine, bright smile. The text underneath read, "Love you, Mom. Thanks for everything you sacrificed for me." When did that love you stop being true? When did it mutate into a tool for emotional blackmail? I stood up and paced through the empty house. I walked into my sewing room. My vintage Singer machine sat in the corner, holding 60 years of family history. The exact same machine my own mother used to hem my middle school graduation dress. The same machine I used to patch the knees of Tyler's jeans when he was in elementary school because we did not have a single dollar to buy new ones. I ran my fingers over the cold metal base. How many nights had I sat right here, running the pedal until my vision went blurry, just so my kids would have clean clothes, hot dinners, and fresh school supplies. And now, one of those kids was actively plotting to leave me with absolutely nothing. I pulled open the bottom drawer where I kept old keepsakes. Inside was a yellowed piece of construction paper, covered in messy, childish handwriting. I had kept it safe for 30 years. Dear Mommy, thank you for never giving up on us. Thank you for working so hard so I can have stuff. When I grow up, I am going to take care of you forever. I love you, Tyler. He was 7 years old when he wrote that with a green crayon. 7 years old, with a pure, beautiful heart. What on earth happened to that sweet little boy? The tears finally broke through. Silent drops at first, and then violent, chest-heaving sobs. I cried for the wonderful son I had lost, for the incredible husband who was dead and gone, and for the fact that my retirement years were being turned into a vicious battlefield. I cried until I had absolutely nothing left, until my body was just an empty shell sitting on the floorboards of the sewing room, surrounded by beautiful memories that now felt like razor blades. My phone buzzed on the floor. I wiped my eyes and looked at the screen. A text from Chloe. Hey Margaret, just found the absolute perfect condo, only $180,000. With the cash you get from the house sale, you will have plenty left over to live a completely stress-free life. Want me to schedule a tour for tomorrow? A stress-free life. Inside 500 square feet. After I had spent decades building a 2,000 square foot sanctuary, another message popped up, this one from Tyler. Cut the drama, Mom. Just sign the papers and we can all be happy. Drama. That specific word snapped me out of it. I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve. I stood up from the floor. Drama. He called my agony, my devastating loss, my desperate resistance. Drama. I marched straight into the master bedroom. I opened the bottom drawer of Arthur's nightstand, where he always kept the important documents. Right on top was a crisp, white business card for his corporate attorney, Catherine Vance. If you ever need someone in your corner, Arthur had told me years ago she is a bulldog. You can trust her completely. I checked the clock on the wall, 3 o'clock in the morning. Way too late to make a phone call. But I saved the number into my contacts. I walked back into the living room and sat down in Arthur's recliner. I closed my eyes and imagined him sitting right there next to me. I could practically hear his deep, steady voice. Maggie. Being a good person does not mean being a doormat. Defending what is yours does not make you a bad mother. It makes you a woman with dignity. I opened my eyes. On the opposite wall hung a framed cross-stitch we had bought together at a local craft fair. It read, "This house was built with love. It is maintained with hard work, and it is defended with dignity." Dignity. I grabbed my leather-bound notebook. I flipped to a brand new, crisp page, and with a rock-steady hand, I wrote, "I have cried every single tear I am going to cry. Now, it is time to go to work. Tyler wants to wage war under the disguise of family love. I am going to teach him a lesson he will never, ever forget. Because a real mother is not the one who hands over whatever a child demands. A real mother delivers exactly what a child needs. And what my son desperately needed was a brutal reminder that in the real world, you reap exactly what you sow." The sunrise found me still wide awake, drinking black coffee, but I was no longer shattered. I was focused. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, I dialed Catherine Vance's office number. "Margaret, how are you holding up?" she answered, her voice laced with genuine surprise. "I need your legal counsel," I said, my voice completely steady. "And I need absolutely no one to know that I have retained your services." There was a brief pause on the line. Then, "Tell me everything." And that was the exact moment my transformation began, from a grieving victim to a master strategist, from a broken-hearted mother to a woman taking her power back. Tyler genuinely believed he had backed me into a corner. He had no idea he had just woken up the absolute fighter I had always been. Catherine Vance showed up at my house the very next morning, not driving a flashy sports car like Mr. Sterling, but slipping in completely under the radar. She parked 2 blocks down the street and walked up to my front porch carrying a simple tote bag, looking for all the world like an old friend dropping by for a cup of tea. We sat down at the dining room table. I poured her a cup of coffee and set out a plate of muffins. She pulled a small yellow legal pad from her bag. "All right, Margaret, start from the very beginning," and I laid it all out. The loans that were never repaid, the constant high-pressure tactics, the thinly veiled threats from his lawyer. I showed her every single detail I had meticulously documented in my leather notebook. Catherine sat there drinking her coffee, listening intently without interrupting once, occasionally jotting down a quick note. When I finally finished speaking, she set her pen down and looked me dead in the eyes. "What exactly is your end goal here?" The question caught me completely off guard. Nobody had bothered to ask me what I actually wanted. Everyone just assumed, demanded, or tried to dictate my future. I want my son to realize exactly what he is doing. I need him to wake up, but above all else, I want to protect myself. Understood. Let us tackle the legal reality first. Arthur left his entire estate to you in a perfectly executed, ironclad will. As long as you are breathing, Tyler has absolutely zero legal claim to any of this property. None. He can scream, he can threaten lawsuits, he can cry to a judge, but legally speaking, he holds no power. A massive wave of relief washed over my chest. So he cannot force me out of my home? No. However, Catherine leaned closer to the table. I can run a deep background check on him to see if there is any leverage we can use against him. Something that gives us the ultimate upper hand if he is foolish enough to drag this into a courtroom. Leverage like what? Hidden debts, fraudulent use of financial documents, literally anything they might have swept under the rug. I gave her full authorization. Catherine packed up photocopies of my entire life, the will, the house deeds, the vehicle titles, and 5 years of bank statements. "I will call you in exactly 1 week," she said as she stood up to leave. "In the meantime, I need you to play the part. Act completely normal. Act like their pressure is breaking you down and you are seriously considering caving in. The more confident Tyler feels, the harder he is going to fall. Play the part." She was asking me to put on a performance, and that is exactly what I did. When Tyler called later that afternoon, I drastically shifted my tone. I sounded incredibly tired, defeated, worn down. "Honey, you might be right. Maybe taking care of this big house is just too much for me now." I could practically hear his jaw drop on the other end of the line. "Wait, seriously, Mom? I am just so tired of fighting, Tyler. Take all the time you need to think it over." His voice rang with pure, unfiltered triumph. He was already measuring the drapes for his new mansion. That same evening, my phone buzzed at 11 o'clock. A FaceTime call from Sarah in New York City. Her face popped onto the screen, framed by dark circles under her eyes. She looked incredibly worried. "Mom, we need to talk right now." "What is going on, sweetie?" "Tyler called me 3 days ago." Sarah bit her lower lip. "He begged me for money. $50,000. He swore it was a life-or-death emergency." My stomach did a violent flip. "What did you say to him?" I told him absolutely not. And then he completely lost his mind. He started screaming at me. Sarah wiped a tear from her cheek. He told me I was a terrible sister, that I was a complete sellout for moving to the East Coast, that I abandoned the family. "Sarah, honey." I hung up on him, Mom. But it felt wrong, so I started digging. Digging into what? I hired a private investigator up here. "Mom, Tyler is drowning in debt. Massive debt." I felt the floorboards tilt beneath my feet. "How much?" "He owes $50,000 to a local loan shark. Not a bank, Mom, a street lender. The kind of guys who charge ridiculous weekly interest rates." Sarah wiped her eyes again. "And Chloe." "Mom, Chloe has maxed out 6 different credit cards. Over $30,000 in debt. Every single penny spent on designer handbags, 5-star dinners, and cosmetic fillers. They are in the hole for almost $100,000. That was why they were coming for my house. It had absolutely nothing to do with family legacy or justice or making things easy for me. It was pure, unadulterated greed and desperate panic. But it gets worse," Sarah continued, her voice trembling slightly. The investigator found out that they are planning to flip your house the literal second the ink dries. They have already been secretly touring the property with real estate agents while you were at the grocery store. They expect to clear $800,000, pay off the loan sharks, clear their credit cards, and pocket the rest. Mom, they are planning to throw you out on the street. Sarah's words fell on me like cinder blocks, one by one, building a massive wall of undeniable truth that I could no longer look away from. Why did you not tell me this sooner? I asked softly. Because I needed hard proof. I wanted a paper trail, not just a hunch. Sarah leaned closer to her webcam. Mom, Arthur left you everything because he knew you were the only one who respected the value of $1. You worked your fingers to the bone your whole life. You suffered. You sacrificed everything for us. Are you really going to let Tyler and that snake of a wife steal your entire life's work? Something ancient and primal woke up inside my chest. A freezing cold, mathematically precise fury. No, I said, using a voice so deep I barely recognized it as my own. I am not going to let them take a single dime. What are you going to do? I am going to build a fortress, and then I am going to teach your brother a lesson I should have taught him 20 years ago. Sarah smiled for the first time during the call. Do you need backup? I can be on a flight to the Midwest by tomorrow morning. No, stay in New York for now. Just keep your phone on loud. After I ended the call, I sat in the dark, staring at the black screen of my phone. Sarah's words kept echoing in my skull. They are planning to throw you out on the street. I dialed Catherine Vance. She answered on the third ring, sounding half asleep. Margaret? Is everything okay? I need you to put the investigation into overdrive. And I need you to draft up a special set of documents. I am listening. I want absolute, ironclad documentation of every single asset, every conversation, every text message, every single threat. And I need you to run a deep credit check on my social security number to see if Tyler has used my name for anything I did not explicitly sign off on. Consider it done. I will be at your house in 3 days. Catherine was a woman of her word. Exactly 3 days later, she walked into my dining room and dropped a massive, 2-inch thick manila folder onto the table. Margaret, we have a major problem. She sat down and flipped open the folder. Right on top were a stack of commercial loan applications. My name was typed at the top. My signature was at the bottom. The only problem was, I had never held a pen to those papers in my life. Tyler applied for a $30,000 personal line of credit using your home equity as collateral. He completely forged your signature. The room spun violently. That is bank fraud. That is a federal crime. Catherine closed the folder with a sharp smack. With this file, I can have the FBI at his office in an hour, or we can use it as the ultimate leverage to dictate the terms of his surrender. My son. My own flesh and blood had forged my signature. He had used me. He had betrayed me on the most despicable level imaginable. A fresh wave of tears burned the back of my eyes, but I swallowed them down. I had cried my quota. Now, it was time to play chess. What is your recommendation? I asked. Catherine pulled a fresh legal pad from her bag. I have a master plan, but I need you to trust me completely, and I need you to follow the script down to the letter. Tell me. And as Catherine outlined her legal strategy step by step, I felt a sensation I had not experienced in months. Absolute power. The power to control my own narrative. The power to teach my son that gravity applies to everyone, and when you jump off a cliff of greed, the ground approaches very, very fast. Tyler wanted to play dirty. Fine. He was about to find out that his mother was a master at the game. Only I played with intellect, not betrayal. The next week was pure, unadulterated theater. And after 67 years of living a quiet life, I discovered I was an absolute powerhouse of an actress. Whenever Tyler called, I played the part of a confused, failing old woman. What were you saying, honey? I completely forgot. I would leave sentences trailing off into nowhere. I would repeat myself on purpose. I painted the flawless picture of a widow rapidly losing her cognitive grip. Chloe swallowed the bait hook, line, and sinker. One Tuesday, she showed up completely unannounced with a woman wearing a lanyard. Margaret, honey, this is Brenda. She is a social worker who specializes in geriatric wellness checks. I just want to make sure you are doing okay, all right? Brenda, a woman in her mid-40s holding an iPad, started administering a memory test in my living room. Can you tell me what day of the week it is? Who is the current president? Do you remember what you ate for breakfast this morning? I answered every single question correctly, but I inserted long, agonizing pauses before speaking, acting as if I was desperately searching for the words. I saw the cruel satisfaction light up Chloe's eyes. She genuinely believed she was building a bulletproof case to have me declared legally incompetent. What she did not know was that Catherine had already sent over her own board-certified geriatric specialist, Dr. Evans, who had quietly visited me the week prior, disguised as a neighborhood friend. Dr. Evans had run a rigorous 2-hour cognitive exam and signed a legally binding medical affidavit certifying that my mental faculties were functioning at a full 100%. While I was putting on my daily performance, Catherine was moving mountains behind the scenes. She tracked every single cent Tyler had moved in the last 5 years. She documented the exorbitant loan shark debts. She pulled the aggressive contracts from a man named Big Tony, a notorious local enforcer who charged a brutal 10% weekly interest rate. She also dug up a golden nugget of information. Tyler had attempted to sell Arthur's Chevy Silverado to a used car lot 3 weeks ago. The dealer turned him away because his name was not on the title, but the attempted transaction was logged in the dealership's computer system. We have an absolute arsenal of ammunition, Catherine told me during a late-night strategy meeting in her downtown office. Now we move to phase 2. Are you ready for the hard part? What is the hard part? We are going to give him exactly what he wants. I stared at her in utter confusion until she laid out the architecture of the trap. It was utterly brilliant. It was incredibly risky. It was poetic justice dialed up to the maximum setting. First, we legally transferred the deed of the commercial bakery property into an irrevocable trust entirely in Sarah's name. The paperwork was filed quietly under seal. Tyler had absolutely no idea that the commercial building had vanished from the inheritance pool. Second, Catherine compiled a massive dossier linking massive liabilities to the remaining assets. The house had unpaid property taxes that I had intentionally ignored on Catherine's advice. $50,000 worth. Years ago, Arthur had taken out a second mortgage to remodel the hardware store. There was still a balance of $150,000 left on the note. The 2 pickup trucks had a combined total of $5,000 in unpaid toll violations and parking tickets, courtesy of Tyler borrowing them for weekend projects. Add in the $20,000 in pending structural maintenance the city was demanding for the driveway and sidewalks. Total liabilities tied directly to the estate. $225,000. Third, I walked into my bank and opened an untouchable high-yield investment account, transferring all of my liquid cash, $90,000, into a vault Tyler could not touch with a 10-foot pole. When he legally assumes ownership of the physical assets, Catherine explained, tapping her pen on the desk, he automatically assumes every single dollar of the debt tied to them. The state civil code is crystal clear. The property transfers with all existing liens. All of that debt becomes his personal, legal obligation. And what happens if he realizes the trap and refuses to sign at the last second? Then we hand the FBI the forged $30,000 loan application. He gets arrested for federal bank fraud and spends 5 to 10 years in a penitentiary. He never sees a single dime either way. Catherine offered a shark-like smile. It is checkmate, Margaret, no matter what move he makes. But the most agonizing part was still ahead, making Tyler believe he had actually won the war. I called my son on a Wednesday afternoon. Tyler, I have finally made a decision. Yeah, Mom? His voice vibrated with greedy anticipation. You are absolutely right. Maintaining this huge property is just destroying my health. I am going to agree to your terms. I let my voice crack perfectly, sounding like a thoroughly broken woman. I just need you to promise me you will take good care of Arthur's trucks. He loved those trucks. Complete silence on the line. Then, of course, Mom, I swear I will take amazing care of everything. A bald-faced lie. But I was lying through my teeth too, so we were playing on an even field. Tell your lawyer to draft the transfer agreements. I will sign whatever you need me to sign. Are you serious? He literally could not believe how easy it was. I am serious. I am just so tired of fighting. When I ended the call, Catherine was looking at me from across the desk with sheer admiration. You deserve an Academy Award for that performance. The next few days were incredibly bizarre. Tyler and Chloe suddenly started treating me like royalty. She dropped off a bouquet of expensive flowers. He started calling me Mama again, as if securing their payday somehow magically regenerated their capacity for human affection. They took me out to an upscale steakhouse to celebrate. Chloe ordered a $100 bottle of champagne. Let us toast to beautiful new beginnings, she beamed, raising her crystal flute. I raised my glass of sparkling water with a twist of lemon, to the inevitable consequences of the choices we make. The double meaning sailed right over their heads. During the dinner, Tyler eagerly outlined his grand master plan. He was going to list the house on the market by Monday. He was putting a down payment on a luxury high-rise condo downtown. Maybe even lease a brand new Mercedes for Chloe. And then I asked, keeping my voice soft, "And where exactly am I going to live?" "Oh, you are going to be so happy, Mom. We are going to find you a really cute place. Small, but super cute." Small. There was that word again. Riding home in the passenger seat of their car, looking out the window at the passing streetlights, I thought about every single time I dragged myself out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning to make it to the factory floor on time. I thought about the endless nights sewing until my fingers literally bled. I thought about decades of relentless, back-breaking sacrifice. And I thought to myself, my son is about to pay the most expensive tuition of his entire life, but the lesson he is going to learn will be absolutely priceless. Catherine scheduled the preliminary mediation hearing for the following Tuesday. She formally notified Mr. Sterling that I was waving the white flag and was ready to surrender the assets. On Monday night, Tyler called me. "Mom, tomorrow is the big day. Are you feeling nervous?" "A little bit." "Hey, do not stress about it. Everything is going to go perfectly. You will see. This is the absolute best thing for everyone. For everyone. Except for me." That is what he thought. "Tyler, I just have one quick question." "Shoot. Did you ever, even once, feel genuinely grateful for everything I sacrificed for you? Did you ever value the decades I worked to put food on your table, clothes on your back, and a roof over your head?" An incredibly awkward silence stretched across the line. "Of course I did, Mom. I have always been grateful." "Then why does it feel like you are punishing me for living too long?" "I am not punishing you. I am just claiming what is rightfully mine. What is fair. Fair." A word he had violently twisted until it completely lost its definition. "I will see you tomorrow morning," I said, and disconnected the call. I did not sleep a wink that night, not because I was terrified, but because my adrenaline was pumping. Tomorrow, Tyler would walk into that room, believing he was the undisputed champion of the world, and I was going to let him wear the crown. Right up until the exact second, I pulled the floorboards out from under his feet. The mediator was a man in his late 50s with thick tortoiseshell glasses and a strictly professional demeanor. The mediation conference room smelled heavily of stale coffee and printer toner. Massive windows overlooked a depressing gray parking garage. Catherine and I arrived first. We sat quietly on one side of the massive mahogany conference table. 10 minutes later, Tyler, Chloe, and Mr. Sterling swaggered into the room. They were sporting smiles they could barely keep locked behind their teeth. "Good morning, everyone," the mediator announced. "I am Mr. Davis. We are gathered here today to amicably resolve the estate transfer of the late Arthur Davis." Tyler leaned back in his leather executive chair as if he had just closed a Fortune 500 merger. Chloe was meticulously inspecting her expensive French manicure. "Mr. Sterling unclasped his leather briefcase and pulled out a stack of pristine legal documents. "My client," Sterling began with a highly theatrical legal tone, "is requesting an equitable distribution of the assets left behind by the deceased. Specifically, the primary residence located at 847 Maple Drive, the 2020 Ford pickup, the 2019 Chevy truck, and a liquid cash disbursement of $50,000. Mr. Davis looked across the table at me. "Mrs. Davis, would you like to place a statement on the record regarding these demands?" I glanced over at Catherine. She gave me a microscopic nod. I have no desire to go to war with my own son, I said, letting my voice waver perfectly. I have lived through enough drama for one lifetime. If he truly believes this is what is fair, let him have it all. I watched the triumphant spark ignite in Tyler's eyes. Chloe reached under the table and squeezed his knee. "Mom," Tyler started, trying to sound magnanimous. "I just want to live in peace," I interrupted him softly. "Sign whatever you need to sign. Take it all. I just want to be able to sleep through the night without worrying anymore." Catherine leaned toward me, playing the role of the highly concerned defense attorney to absolute perfection. "Margaret, I need you to be absolutely certain about this. Once you sign this transfer agreement, I am completely certain," I stated firmly. "Hand it all over to my son." Mr. Sterling practically launched himself out of his chair. "Excellent. An incredibly wise decision, ma'am. Mr. Davis, let us proceed with the paperwork immediately." The mediator slid the preliminary voluntary asset forfeiture agreements across the mahogany table. Tyler devoured the pages with his eyes, practically panting. In those pages, he saw his entire future mapped out. The house sold for cash, his bank accounts overflowing, his loan sharks paid off. I signed my name on the dotted line with a deliberately trembling hand. "Now you, Mr. Tyler," the mediator instructed. Tyler grabbed the expensive fountain pen. He signed his name with massive, aggressive, victorious strokes. His signature practically screamed, "I won." "Perfect," Mr. Davis said, stamping the documents. "These are the preliminary bindings. The final court hearing will take place in exactly 15 business days to formally execute the property deeds in front of the judge." 15 days? Chloe blurted out, unable to mask her greedy impatience. "It is standard state protocol, ma'am. 15 business days." As we walked out into the hallway, Tyler pulled me into a tight hug, a hug that tasted like pure arsenic. "Thanks, Mom. You did the right thing. The right thing. What an incredibly flexible concept." Those next 15 days were an exercise in bizarre, fake tranquility. Tyler called me every single afternoon, playing the role of the devoted, loving son flawlessly. Chloe spammed my phone with links to tiny apartments. "This one is absolutely to die for, Margaret. And it is only $180,000. While they were shopping for luxury cars, Catherine was working with surgical precision. She organized every single piece of evidence, every certified financial record, every single legal trap. Dr. Evans prepared his bulletproof medical evaluation. Catherine's forensic accountant calculated Tyler's exact debt down to the final penny. Sarah called me from New York every single night. "Are you absolutely sure you want to pull the trigger on this, Mom? I have never been more sure of anything in my life. It is going to be brutal. He is your son, which is exactly why he needs to learn." The night before the final court hearing, I opened Arthur's closet for the very last time. I took his favorite blue plaid shirt off the hanger and folded it with absolute care. I placed it gently inside a cardboard moving box, right next to the antique grandfather clock he had restored. "Arthur," I whispered into the empty room, "tomorrow morning, I am going to do exactly what you would have told me to do. I am going to protect us. I am going to protect myself, and I am going to protect our son, even if he is too blind to understand it right now." I slept like an absolute rock for the first time in almost a year. The morning of the final hearing broke with bright, clear skies. I dressed in a sharp navy blue tailored suit that Arthur had bought me for our 10th anniversary. I styled my hair meticulously. I clipped on the pearl earrings that my mother had passed down to me. If I was going to drop the hammer on my son, I was going to do it looking like a queen. We arrived at the county courthouse at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. Tyler and Chloe were already waiting in the lobby, practically glowing. Tyler was wearing a brand new, tailored designer suit, almost certainly bought on a high-interest credit card, banking on today's massive payout. We walked into the judge's chambers. This was much more formal than the mediation room. Judge Harrison, a stern-looking man in his early 60s, presided from behind a massive elevated oak bench. "Good morning. We are here for the final execution of the voluntary asset transfer in the matter of Margaret Davis, widow of Arthur Davis." We took our seats. Catherine sat to my right, completely tranquil, like a calm ocean right before a Category 5 hurricane hits the shoreline. Does Mrs. Margaret Davis formally ratify the voluntary transfer of the listed assets entirely over to her son, Tyler Davis? I stood up straight. Yes, Your Honor. Without any form of coercion or outside pressure? Without any pressure whatsoever. The lie rolled off my tongue like butter. Very well, Mr. Tyler Davis. Do you formally accept the total receipt of the assets detailed in this legal document? Tyler popped out of his chair wearing a smile that could have blinded a pilot. Yes, Your Honor, I accept them completely. You may approach the bench and sign in the presence of the court clerk. I signed the heavy parchment. Tyler signed right below my name. The clerk stamped the seal. For a span of 5 seconds, the courtroom was completely dead silent. Tyler looked over at me, with an expression he genuinely tried to pass off as deep affection. Thanks, Mom. And that is when Catherine Vance stood up. Your Honor, before you officially close this proceeding, there is a supplementary addendum of financial documents that must be entered into the public record to finalize this asset transfer. Judge Harrison furrowed his thick gray eyebrows. Supplementary documents? Yes, Your Honor. As per the state civil code, when physical real estate and vehicular assets are transferred in their entirety, the receiving party automatically assumes all existing financial liabilities tied to those specific properties. Mr. Sterling's face drained of all color. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. What on earth are you talking about? Catherine unclasped her leather briefcase with the dramatic flair of a magician opening a locked vault. She pulled out a thick stack of certified documents and slapped them down on the judge's bench. Exhibit A. Unpaid county property taxes on the primary residence, totaling $50,000. 3 consecutive years of delinquency. The victorious smile instantly vanished from Tyler's face. Exhibit B. An outstanding commercial second mortgage on that exact same property with a remaining principal balance of $150,000. Chloe's jaw actually dropped open, but no sound came out of her throat. Exhibit C. Unpaid municipal traffic citations, toll evasions, and impound fees attached to the 2 pickup trucks, totaling exactly $5,000. Mr. Sterling was frantically flipping through his own copies with aggressively shaking fingers. This is completely. Exhibit D. Pending municipal citations for structural sidewalk and driveway maintenance on the properties totaling $20,000. Catherine paused. The silence in the courtroom was absolutely deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on a mattress. Exhibit E. The grand total of legally binding liabilities directly associated with the assets that Mr. C's, Tyler Davis just formally accepted ownership of $225,000. Tyler looked like he was about to vomit. What? No, that is impossible. It is 100% legal, Catherine stated with surgical, chilling calmness. By signing the acceptance of the physical property, you legally assumed the debt attached to it. The assets come with the liabilities. That is how the law works. Chloe jumped out of her chair, her face turning bright red. This is a setup. You trapped us. I stood up, and for the first time in a year, I used my real, powerful voice. This is not a trap. This is justice. And then Catherine dropped the nuclear bomb. She reached back into her briefcase. The atmosphere in the room had become so incredibly tense you could barely breathe. But we are not finished yet, Your Honor, she continued, her voice echoing off the wood paneling. We also have hard, forensic evidence of federal financial crimes committed by Mr. Tyler Davis. What? Tyler screamed, panic completely taking over his body. Catherine placed a new stack of papers in front of the judge. Commercial line of credit applications filed 8 months ago with the First National Bank. Total requested funds, $30,000. The collateral listed on the application? The primary residence of Mrs. Margaret Davis. Judge Harrison picked up the paperwork. He began examining it with intense, terrifying scrutiny. The massive issue here, Catherine continued relentlessly, is that the signature of Mrs. Margaret Davis on these bank documents is a complete forgery. She never authorized this line of credit. I pulled a certified folder out of my purse, We commissioned an independent forensic handwriting analysis. A board-certified graphologist compared my legal signature with the one on those bank documents. The match rate is exactly 0%. This constitutes aggravated forgery and federal bank fraud, Catherine stated clearly. Felony offenses punishable under the state penal code. Tyler physically collapsed back into his wooden chair. I did not. Did not what? I cut him off, stepping out from behind the defense table. I was no longer the frail, confused old widow. I was the powerhouse woman who had survived decades in a textile mill. Did you honestly think I would never find out? Did you really believe your mother was that stupid? Mom, please, I can explain everything. Silence. My voice cracked like a whip across the courtroom. 67 years of repressed anger exploded into that one single word. You used me. You forged my name on federal documents. You gambled with my entire life's work. And now you want to explain? Chloe tried to jump in. Margaret, please. This is all just a massive misunderstanding. You. I snapped my head toward her and hit her with a glare so venomous it literally made her take a step backward. You built this nightmare. You, with your designer bags, your endless credit card debt, and your pathetic, shallow manipulations. Catherine pulled out the final stack of documents. Speaking of debt, let us submit the records of a $50,000 personal loan taken out from a Mr. Salvatore Moroni, locally known as Big Tony. Weekly interest rate of 10%. Current outstanding balance with penalties. $60,000. How in the world did you get those records? Tyler whispered, staring at the floor. Because while you were busy plotting to throw me out on the street, I was doing my homework, I said, walking right up to the edge of his table. Every single time you called crying for cash. Every single loan you promised to pay back and never did. Every single lie you told me. I documented it all. Catherine was absolutely merciless. Let us also enter the credit histories of Mrs. Chloe Davis. Total revolving debt of $30,000 across 6 different accounts. Luxury department stores, cosmetic surgery clinics, 5-star restaurants. Chloe finally broke down and started sobbing. Those tears did not move my heart for a single millisecond. Mr. Sterling tried one last desperate maneuver to save his license. Your Honor, my client, it is incredibly clear that there were some severe lapses in judgment here, but lapses in judgment? Judge Harrison slammed the documents down on his desk with a massive thud. Counselor, I am looking at hard evidence of federal bank fraud. That is not a lapse in judgment. That is a felony. Your Honor, please. Catherine stepped right into the center of the room. My client is willing to decline pressing federal criminal charges, but only under a very specific set of non-negotiable conditions. Tyler snapped his head up, a look of desperate, pathetic hope flashing across his tear-stained face. What conditions? Catherine pulled a pristine, single-page document from her bag. A legally binding agreement of total and absolute surrender of any and all claims to the estate of the late Arthur Davis. Mr. Tyler Davis will legally commit to the following terms. 1. Total forfeiture of all requested assets. 2. Payment of $10,000 in civil restitution for the attempted bank fraud, to be paid in monthly installments of $1,000 over 10 months. 3. Mandatory attendance at professional psychological therapy for 1 full calendar year. And 4, I added, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. You will apologize to me, publicly, in front of our entire family. You will confess exactly what you attempted to do. Tyler looked at me, his eyes overflowing with tears. Mom? No, I stopped him dead in his tracks. I am no longer your convenient little ATM. I am the woman you actively tried to rob blind. The woman you tried to leave with absolutely nothing. The woman your wife wanted to lock away in a nursing home. Chloe jumped up, absolutely hysterical, pointing a trembling finger right at my face. You planned this whole thing. You set a massive trap for us. No, I replied with glacial, terrifying calmness. You built this trap entirely by yourselves. I simply handed you enough rope to let you hang yourselves. Judge Harrison cleared his throat loudly. Mr. Davis, you have 2 choices. You sign the settlement agreement drafted by Miss Vance right now, or I place a call to the district attorney's office and you face federal charges for fraud and forgery. You have 2 minutes to consult with your attorney. Tyler and Mr. Sterling huddled in the far corner of the room. I watched Sterling whispering frantically into Tyler's ear. I watched my son completely fall apart. I watched the exact second he realized his entire life had just collapsed into dust. Chloe, on the other hand, was already furiously typing on her cell phone. I caught snippets of her frantic whispers. I cannot be married to a bankrupt loser. No, listen to me. Without the inheritance money, this is completely over. She was already planning her exit strategy. Right there, in the middle of a federal courthouse, she was already looking for the emergency exit. Tyler slowly walked back to the defense table. His eyes were bloodshot, his shoulders completely slumped in defeat. "I accept," he croaked, his voice shattering. "You accept what, Mr. Davis?" the judge demanded. "I accept the settlement terms. I forfeit the assets. I will pay the monthly restitution. I will go to the therapy sessions." Every single word looked like it caused him physical agony. "And I will make the public apology." Catherine slid the settlement contract across the table. Tyler signed it with a violently shaking hand. When he finally put the pen down, he looked up at me. "Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted?" "No," I answered, with genuine, heavy sadness in my heart. What I desperately wanted was a son who actually loved me. But instead, I got a son who needed to learn the hard way that you reap exactly what you sow. I turned around and started walking toward the heavy oak doors. Catherine gathered her files. Chloe exploded behind me. "You ruined our lives. Because of you, Tyler is drowning in debt. This is all your fault." I stopped with my hand on the brass door handle. I turned my head and looked at her one last time. "No," I said, my voice completely steady and absolutely lethal. "I did not ruin you. You ruined yourselves with your endless greed, your pathetic lies, and your complete lack of moral character." I simply defended my home. I walked out of those courtroom doors with my head held incredibly high. I left Tyler sobbing at the defense table. I left Chloe screaming at him that he was a useless failure. I left Mr. Sterling desperately packing his briefcase in deep professional shame. When Catherine and I finally walked out into the courthouse parking lot, the midday sun was shining brilliantly. I took a massive, deep breath of fresh air. "How do you feel?" Catherine asked, putting on her sunglasses. "I honestly do not know yet," I replied truthfully. "I won the war, but it feels like a massive loss." "You won your dignity back, Margaret, and that is never, ever a loss." Sitting in the passenger seat of Catherine's car on the ride home, I checked my phone. A text from Sarah. "Mom, how did it go?" "It went perfectly," I texted back. "I will call you tonight to give you the details." Another text popped up. This one was from an unknown local number. "Mrs. Davis, this is Big Tony. I heard through the grapevine what went down at the courthouse today. I just want to make it crystal clear that your boy owes me a lot of cash. If he misses his payment on Friday, there are going to be severe consequences." I instantly blocked the number. Tyler's problems were no longer my problems. I arrived back at my house, which was still 100% mine. I unlocked the blue front door, and the familiar, comforting smell washed over me. Dark roast coffee, old hardwood floors, and beautiful memories. I walked into the living room and sat down in Arthur's recliner. I looked over at the grandfather clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time was still moving forward, but for the very first time in almost a year, it was finally moving in my favor. The next few days were incredibly strange. The house was completely silent, but it was a very different kind of silence. It was not the heavy, suffocating silence of loneliness. It was the light, airy silence of total peace. Catherine called me 3 days after the courthouse showdown. "I have some updates, Margaret. Tell me, Chloe officially filed for divorce yesterday morning. She is citing irreconcilable differences, and she is petitioning the court for aggressive spousal support." I was not surprised in the slightest. Rats always abandon the ship the second they smell water in the hull. And Tyler? Completely devastated, from what my contacts tell me. He lost his wife, he lost his massive payday, he lost his reputation, and he still owes you the first $1,000 installment by the end of the month. A small part of me, the part that would always be a mother, felt a sharp pang of sorrow for him. But the part of me that had finally learned my own worth knew this brutal crash landing was absolutely necessary. "There is one more thing," Catherine continued, her tone shifting slightly. "Big Tony is not playing games. He gave Tyler exactly 1 week to come up with at least $15,000 in cash, or, well, you know exactly how guys like him operate. Are you suggesting that I bail him out? I am simply providing you with the intelligence on the ground. What you choose to do with that information is entirely up to you." I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet living room, thinking hard. Tyler was in genuine physical danger. Real danger. Should I step in? I tossed and turned all night. On one hand, he had dug his own grave with a backhoe. On the other hand, he was still the boy I gave birth to. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I made my final executive decision. I called Catherine the second her office opened. "I want to make a move, but strictly on my own terms. I am listening. I am going to put the commercial bakery property on the market for a quick cash sale. With that money, I am going to pay off Tyler's debt to Big Tony in full. Just that specific debt, nothing else. Margaret, are you absolutely certain about this? I am not doing this for him, Catherine. I am doing this so I can sleep through the night knowing I did not leave my own son in a situation where he could end up in an alleyway." The commercial property sold to a cash buyer in 5 days for $380,000. I wired the $60,000 directly to the loan shark to clear the books. I distributed the rest of the funds carefully. $150,000 went straight into a trust for Sarah. $100,000 went to establish an entrepreneurial scholarship in Arthur's name at our local community church. I kept the remaining $70,000 for my own retirement safety net. When Big Tony received the wire transfer, I had Catherine deliver a very specific message to him on my behalf. "Do not ever lend my son another single dime. If you do, you know right now that you will never see that money again." The man, who had a ruthless reputation all over the city, actually laughed out loud when Catherine read him the message. "You tell that lady she is tougher than 90% of the guys I deal with on the street. She has my total respect." Exactly 2 weeks after the courthouse hearing, Tyler knocked on my front door. I barely recognized him. He had dropped at least 10 pounds. He had massive, dark bags under his eyes. He was wearing the exact same wrinkled shirt he had been wearing in court. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice incredibly small. I stepped aside and let him enter. We sat in the living room, taking seats on opposite ends of the sofa, feeling like complete strangers sitting in a doctor's waiting room. "I heard that you paid off Tony. I did not do it for you. I did it because I refused to carry the guilt if those men decided to break your legs." He nodded slowly, staring down at his scuffed shoes. "Chloe left me. She packed up everything that had any resale value while I was at work. She even drained our joint checking account down to 0. And you came here expecting me to throw a pity party for you." "No, I came here to try and explain myself. There is absolutely no explanation on this earth that justifies what you tried to do to me." "I know." He finally looked up at me. His eyes were swimming in tears. "But I need you to understand how I spiraled into this mess. From the day I met Chloe, she constantly made me feel like I was never enough. Like I needed to make more money, drive a better car, have a higher status. And I just wanted to impress her. I wanted to be the high roller she expected me to be. And to play that role, you decided to rob your own mother blind? I did not see it like that at the time. I convinced myself I was just taking an early advance on what would eventually be mine anyway. I told myself you did not really need the money as much as I did. Tyler, I worked for 25 years on a factory floor. I destroyed the joints in my hands sewing uniforms. Arthur and I built this life by sacrificing every single luxury. And you convinced yourself I did not need it? I was a complete idiot. You were a son who completely forgot where he came from. A long, heavy silence settled over the room. The grandfather clock ticked away the agonizing seconds. Is there any chance you will ever forgive me?" he asked, his voice finally breaking. "I do not know," I answered with brutal honesty. "Forgiveness is not just handed out for free. It has to be earned. And you have an absolute mountain to climb before you even come close to earning it. What do I have to do? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was my own personal list of non-negotiable terms. First, you will not miss a single penny of the monthly restitution you legally signed for. Second, you are going to go to your court-ordered therapy, not because the judge is forcing you, but because you genuinely want to fix what is broken inside your head. Third, you will keep an honest job, and you will survive on exactly what you earn, without ever begging for a bailout again. Fourth, on the first of every month, you are going to write me a letter. You will not ask me for a single dime. You will simply tell me exactly what steps you are taking to become a better man. He stared at me in total disbelief. You are actually giving me another chance? I am giving you the opportunity to earn a chance. Those are two very different things. He stood up and took a step forward, raising his arms to hug me. I immediately took a step back, holding my hand up. No, not yet. Hugs are earned through consistent actions, not empty words. He nodded, aggressively wiping the tears off his face. I am going to prove to you that I can change, Mom. You better, Tyler, because this is the absolute last train leaving the station. There will not be another one. When he finally walked out the door, I sat back down in the recliner. My chest felt incredibly heavy. It was not joy, and it was not depression. It was somewhere right in the middle. Had I made the right call? The doorbell rang again. I stood up, assuming Tyler had forgotten his keys on the porch. I opened the door and gasped. It was Sarah. My daughter was standing on my front porch holding a rolling suitcase. "Surprise," she said, flashing a tentative, beautiful smile. "I cashed in all my saved vacation days at the firm. I figured you could use some backup right about now." And standing right there, looking at the daughter who had booked a last-minute flight from New York City just to make sure I was okay, the dam finally broke. The tears poured down my face. We wrapped our arms around each other right there in the doorway. It was a long, incredibly tight embrace. The kind of hug that instantly repairs years of quiet distance. "Thank you so much for coming," I whispered into her shoulder. "Thank you for being such a badass," she whispered back. We cooked dinner together that night. Sarah chopped the vegetables while I seasoned the roast. We talked about absolutely everything and absolutely nothing. We caught up on years of polite, surface-level phone calls. "Mom," she said, setting her wine glass down on the dining table, "what you did in that courtroom was legendary. Arthur would be so incredibly proud of you." "You really think so?" "I know so. He always told me you were the toughest woman he ever met, and he was dead right." I slept beautifully that night. With my daughter sleeping safely in the guest room, my house legally secured, and my dignity completely intact, I had finally won. But much more importantly, I had won myself back. The next few months were a slow, steady process of rebuilding. Tyler followed through on his first restitution payment. He showed up on my porch right on time on the 15th of the month, exactly as we had agreed. He handed me a crisp, white envelope containing $1,000 in cash. "Here it is," he said, staring at the porch floorboards. "Are you going to your therapy sessions?" "Yes, ma'am. Every Tuesday evening." "Is it actually helping?" He shrugged his shoulders slightly. "The doctor says I have a severe dependency on external validation. That I spent my entire adult life looking for approval in all the worst places. I did not offer any commentary. I simply took the envelope. Where is your letter for the month?" He pulled a second envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it over. I waited until he drove away to open it. His handwriting was a bit messy, but the words felt incredibly raw. "Mom, I got a job as a junior accountant at a small logistics firm across town. The pay is pretty bad, but it is honest work. I moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment over a laundromat. It is cramped, but the lease is in my name, and I do not owe anybody anything. Chloe called me on Tuesday begging for cash to pay her cell phone bill. I told her no. It was the very first time in my life I actually told someone no. It felt like breathing fresh air. I still do not know how to fix everything I destroyed between us, but I am putting in the work to be a better man. Tyler." I folded the letter neatly and placed it inside a special wooden box I kept on my dresser. Sarah stayed with me for 2 full weeks. We deep cleaned the entire house together, reorganized Arthur's garage, and packed up the last of his clothes to donate to charity. "Are you absolutely sure you are ready for this?" Sarah asked gently as I taped up a box of his sweaters. "Arthur is not coming back, honey, but his love lives on in every decent thing I do. Someone out there freezing on the streets needs these coats a lot more than my closet does." We dropped the boxes off at a downtown men's shelter. The only things I kept were his blue plaid shirt and the ticking grandfather clock. When Sarah finally had to catch her flight back to New York, I cried at the airport terminal. "I am going to fly down way more often," she promised, hugging me tight. "And you need to fly up to the city to visit me." "Me? In New York City? Why not?" "Mom, you are 67, not 87. You still have so much life to live. You need to travel, explore, eat good food." She was absolutely right. 2 months after the courtroom showdown, Catherine Vance called me with the most bizarre news of my entire life. "Do you remember Big Tony, the loan shark? How could I possibly forget?" "Well, it turns out he was so incredibly impressed by how you handled the situation that he wants to offer you a job." "A job? Doing what?" "As an independent consultant. He says 90% of his clients are exactly like Tyler. Arrogant kids who borrow massive amounts of cash without fully grasping the terrifying consequences. He wants to pay you to give them a brutal reality check before he hands over the cash." I actually laughed out loud in my kitchen. A loan shark wants to hire me to teach financial responsibility to his victims? Basically, yes. He is offering $3,000 a month, 2 mandatory seminars a week, 1 hour each. I thought it over for a day, and to my own shock, I accepted the offer. It actually turned out to be incredibly therapeutic. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I drove down to Tony's office, a place I had imagined as a dark, smoke-filled basement, but was actually just a boring corporate suite in a strip mall. I sat in a conference room with desperate, terrified people looking for fast cash. I told them my entire story. I laid out the brutal, unforgiving consequences of living beyond your means. Some of them ignored me and took the money anyway. But the ones who actually listened, the ones who walked out the door without signing the predatory contracts, they made every single second worth it. One Thursday afternoon, a woman in her late 40s came in desperate for a $30,000 loan to bail her son out of a gambling debt. I sat her down and told her the saga of Tyler and Chloe. I watched her completely break down in tears. I watched her see her own tragic reflection in my story. "I am not going to take the loan," she whispered at the end of the hour. "I am going to let my son hit rock bottom. He has to face his own music. That," I told her, grabbing her hand, "is the greatest act of love you will ever show him." Time kept moving forward. Tyler never missed a single monthly payment. His letters became noticeably deeper, shedding the corporate jargon and tapping into raw honesty. In one letter, he wrote, "My therapist asked me this week when was the last time I looked you in the eye and said a genuine thank you. Not a thank you for a free dinner or a cash bailout, but a real thank you just for being my mother, for raising me, for never throwing me away." I sat in the chair for 20 minutes, and I could not remember the last time I did it, realizing that absolutely shattered my heart. In another letter, Chloe officially married a wealthy real estate developer last weekend. I saw the wedding photos pop up on social media. I did not feel a single ounce of anger or jealousy or sadness. All I felt was this massive wave of relief that her toxic chaos was finally out of my life for good. By the 7th month, Tyler asked if I would be willing to meet him for a cup of coffee. He picked a cheap, no-name diner right around the corner from his new office. He was already sitting in a booth when I walked in. His fingernails were clean, and he was wearing a cheap, button-down shirt that he had clearly ironed himself. He looked remarkably different. He looked older, yes, but he looked grounded, authentic. "Mom, I just want to look you in the eye and tell you that I finally understand exactly why you did what you did in that courtroom. It was not an act of cruelty. It was the ultimate act of tough love. And is your ego finally ready to accept that reality?" I smiled, just a little bit. My ego almost ruined my entire life. I had to learn how to completely let it go. We sat in the diner booth, sharing a quiet, comfortable silence over our coffee mugs. It was not total forgiveness yet, but it was a solid foundation. It was a bridge. On the 9th month, He handed me his second-to-last payment envelope, just $1,000 left to go. When this is officially paid off, he asked quietly, "Do you think we could maybe try being a real family again?" "That entirely depends," I answered. "What exactly does the word family mean to you now?" "It means mutual respect. It means showing up without holding my hand out. It means valuing the actual time we spend together, instead of valuing what you can buy for me. If you truly mean that, then yes, we can try." On the day he handed me the final $1,000 envelope, he actually cried on my front porch. Not tears of depression, but tears of absolute liberation. "I do not owe you a single dime anymore," he whispered. "You never owed me a dime in the first place, Tyler. You owed me respect, and you are finally paying it." That afternoon, I hugged him. For the very first time in over a calendar year, I wrapped my arms around my son. It was not the same hug we used to share. It was infinitely better, because this one was built on solid truth. Exactly 1 year after the brutal courtroom hearing, I hosted a small, intimate family dinner. Sarah flew in from New York. Tyler drove over by himself, leaving his ego and his entitlement at the door. We cooked dinner together. The three of us crowded into my kitchen, chopping vegetables, searing steaks, and actually laughing out loud. At one point, Sarah and Tyler bumped shoulders by the stove. A silent, heavy look passed between them. A lifetime of unspoken apologies. Then, Tyler pulled his sister into a massive bear hug. "I really missed you, Sarah," he said softly. "I missed you too, you idiot," she smiled, hugging him back tightly. When we finally sat down at the dining room table, I raised my glass of sparkling water. "I want to propose a toast," I said, looking at my 2 adult children. "Not to the things we lost this year, but to the incredible things we gained. We lost our shallow illusions, but we gained the absolute truth. We lost the easy way out, but we gained real character. And above all else, we finally learned that true love is not handing someone exactly what they demand. True love is giving them exactly what they need to survive." "Cheers," they both echoed, clinking their glasses against mine. Later that night, after they had both gone home, I went into my bedroom and pulled out my leather-bound notebook. I flipped to the very first page and read the words I had written a year ago. "Today my son stopped being my son. Today I met a stranger wearing his face." Right beneath those words, I took a pen and wrote a brand new line. And today, exactly 1 year later, my son finally became my son again, but an infinitely better version. Because sometimes, you have to completely lose yourself in the dark before you can ever hope to find the light. I closed the notebook and looked over at Arthur's grandfather clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time had finally healed us. And that, I realized with a peaceful smile, was the truest definition of poetic justice. Today is Sunday. Tyler drives over for lunch every other weekend now. Not every single Sunday like he used to, because we both finally understand that the quantity of visits does not equal love. The quality does. This morning, he knocked on my door bright and early. He was holding a cheap bouquet of wild daisies from the local farmer's market, not $50 imported roses. "These are your absolute favorite," he smiled warmly. I took the flowers and inhaled their scent. They smelled like simplicity. They smelled like honest work. "Come on in." I brewed a fresh pot of coffee. We sat down at the kitchen island, exactly like we used to do decades ago, back when he was just a little boy running home from school with a million stories to tell me. "How are things at the logistics company?" I asked, pouring him a mug. "Really good, actually. They promoted me to floor supervisor. The pay bump is not massive, but it feels incredible to actually earn the recognition. I am so proud of you." "Mom," he set his coffee mug down on the granite counter, "I need to run something by you." My heart did a tiny, involuntary flutter. "Another demand? Another crisis? Tell me." "I met someone a few months ago. Her name is Sophia. She teaches 2nd grade at the public school down the street. She is incredibly down to earth. She works hard for every dollar she makes. She is the complete, polar opposite of Chloe. And I would really love for you to meet her, but only when you feel absolutely ready for it. I do not want to rush you into anything. I looked across the island at my son. He was no longer the arrogant, entitled monster demanding the keys to my house. He was a grown man asking for my blessing, respecting my boundaries, and honoring my peace of mind. I would absolutely love to meet her. His whole face lit up like a Christmas tree. Seriously? Seriously. We drank our coffee in a deeply comfortable silence. Then, Tyler spoke up again, his voice dropping an octave. Sometimes I lie awake at night and think about that morning in the courtroom, about how I genuinely believed I had checkmated you, about that pathetic, smug smile I was wearing. He shook his head in disgust. Do you want to know what the absolute worst part of that day was? What was it? It was not when Catherine started reading off all the debts. It was not when I saw the massive numbers. It was the exact second I realized that I had morphed into the exact same man my father was. That raw confession caught me completely off guard. Your father? He abandoned us because he was greedy. He thought there was a bigger, better payday waiting for him somewhere else. And he ended up dying completely alone, with absolutely nothing. Tyler looked me dead in the eyes. I was sprinting down that exact same path. I was ready to abandon you, ready to throw you to the wolves for a shiny illusion, but you stopped running. No, you tackled me to the ground. You forced me to look in the mirror and see the monster I was becoming. I reached across the kitchen island and placed my hand over his. He held it tightly. Tyler, what I did in that courtroom was not an act of revenge. It was a rescue mission. I was saving you from yourself, from Chloe's toxic ambition, from a miserable life built entirely on lies. Because true love is not nodding your head and saying yes to every demand. True love is having the absolute spine to say no when it is the hardest word in the English language. I know that now, and I owe you my life for it. After we finished breakfast, we walked out into the backyard. Tyler spent 2 hours helping me prune the wild rose bushes along the fence line. Arthur really loved this yard, didn't he? He mentioned casually while clipping a dead branch. More than anything, I am so incredibly sorry I did not respect him more while he was still here. You can respect him right now, by living your life exactly the way he would have wanted to see you live it, honest, hardworking, full of dignity. We worked side by side in a peaceful silence. The mid-morning sun was warm on my back. The neighborhood birds were chirping in the oak trees. When we finally finished the yard work, we sat down together on the cast-iron bench. Mom, did you ever actually forgive me? The million-dollar question he had been dodging for a year finally slipped out into the open air. Yes, I answered slowly, weighing every word. I did forgive you. But I am never, ever going to forget. And not because I want to hold it over your head like a weapon, but because forgetting it would mean betraying every single brutal lesson we both had to learn. I understand. Forgiveness does not erase the past. Exactly, Tyler. Forgiveness just unlocks the heavy chains so you can walk forward and build a completely different future. And that is exactly what you are doing right now. He wiped a rogue tear from his cheek. I really do not deserve a mother like you. You probably do not. I laughed softly, bumping my shoulder against his. But you are stuck with me anyway, because that is exactly how a mother's love operates. You do not earn it. It is just given to you, even when it physically hurts to hand it over. We sat on that iron bench until the sun started dipping below the suburban rooflines. When Tyler finally drove away, I stayed out in the garden. I looked up at my beautiful house, the sanctuary I had fought a bloody war to defend. I thought about Arthur. I thought about Sarah thriving in her massive corporate office in New York. I thought about Tyler, slowly but surely learning how to be a good, honorable man. I thought about all those desperate, terrified people sitting in Big Tony's conference room, searching for a lifeline in my story. And then, I thought about myself. I thought about the little girl who grew up without a father, the young, terrified mother abandoned with 2 babies, the woman who ran a sewing machine until her hands cramped to give her children the life she was denied, the wife who found an incredible, respectful love in the autumn of her life, the widow who stood her ground and defended her castle when the entire world expected her to surrender. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket and recorded a quick voice memo for Sarah. Hey, sweetie, it is Mom. I just wanted to call and say I love you. I am so incredibly proud of the powerhouse woman you have become. I do not care how many miles are between us. You are always right here in my heart. And thank you for teaching me that sometimes giving someone space is the greatest form of love. Then, I opened a brand new audio file and recorded a message just for myself. Margaret, you have lived on this earth for 67 years. You have been knocked down to the dirt 1,000 times. You have stood back up 1,001. You have loved deeply. You have lost tragically. You have cried oceans. You have fought wars. And you are still standing right here, 2 feet on the ground, full of dignity, made of iron. Not because they failed to wound you, but because you absolutely refused to let those wounds dictate your story. Always remember this. Your ultimate value is not measured by the square footage of your home or the balance in your bank account. Your value is measured by the things you absolutely refuse to let anyone strip away from you. And nobody, not for a single second, ever managed to strip away your dignity. I saved the audio file to my phone. Someday, when I am much older and my memory starts to actually fade, I want to press play and remember exactly who I was. From inside the house, Arthur's grandfather clock chimed 6 times. 6 o'clock in the evening. Time to start cooking dinner. I stood up from the iron bench, dusted the garden soil off my jeans, and walked proudly through my blue front door. Life was still moving forward, and I was marching right in step with it, because I finally learned that being a mother does not mean laying down in the dirt and letting people walk all over your back. It means having a heart big enough to build an impenetrable fortress of boundaries. My son genuinely believed he had crushed me that morning. He smiled in the courtroom. But the absolute truth is, I threw him a life raft. I saved him from himself. Because true love is never about handing someone the keys to the kingdom just because they throw a tantrum. It is about handing them the exact tools they need to build their own. And what my son desperately needed was not my property, my cash, or my submission. He needed to be violently humbled. He needed to learn that in the real world, absolutely nothing worth having is gained by stepping on the throat of the woman who gave you life. He needed to realize that true wealth is not the money you hoard, but the self-respect you refuse to surrender. And he learned the hard way that when a mother finally decides to draw a line in the sand and fight back, she becomes the most terrifying, unstoppable force in the entire universe. Because a mother's love can be as gentle as a morning breeze, or it can be as dense and unforgiving as a solid titanium wall. It all just depends on what kind of lesson her children desperately need to learn. If this story resonated with your heart today, leave me a comment below letting me know what city or state you are tuning in from. Have you ever been forced to set a brutal, heartbreaking boundary with someone you love deeply? Sometimes, standing up for our own dignity is the most profound act of love we can possibly execute, not just to protect ourselves, but to save the people we love from destroying their own souls. Hit the like button if you believe that absolute respect is the fundamental bedrock of any real relationship, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, real-life stories that prove it is never, ever too late to take your power back. Because when the dust settles, the most important lesson of all is simply this. Being a good, kind-hearted person does not mean you have to be anybody's fool. And sometimes, loving someone with all your heart means having the absolute courage to look them dead in the eye and say, "This ends right here. The end."